True Crime Page podcast featuring Scott Williams Collins.
Hello and welcome to the True Crime Page podcast. I'm your host Scott Williams Collier. Today, guys, marks our very first show of 2020, so I'd like to start by wishing you all a very happy new year. Hope you had a fantastic Christmas with your friends and family. Now, I know just before Christmas I did say that we were going to try and get a few shows in with Jeff Canarsie and another one with Chris Clark. Unfortunately, that didn't materialise, but as the old saying goes, better late than never. So today, I've got my very good friend on, Mob Talk Radio host Jeff Canarsie. Jeff, welcome onto the show.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I just thought today, Jeff, we could, just have a general conversation about the mob and about what you're doing with Mob Talk Radio and what's been happening recently.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. Now, there's one thing that we spoke about recently, which was quite funny, really, and that was about reputed mob associates Peter Tuccio and Jonathan Gurino. Now, they recently got charged with trying to extort a businessman back in 2015, and he tried to intimidate him by setting fire to his car. Now, Jonathan Gurino was actually caught on CCTV doing this, and in the process he managed to set fire to himself as well, which I find hilarious. Now, I just wanted to know what your opinion on that was, and furthermore, more importantly, Peter Tuccio has been pictured with upper echelon guys in the mob. He's been pictured with reputed Philadelphia crime boss Joey Merlino recently. I just wanted to know, what does that mean for the mob when you've got people like Peter Tuccio hanging around with them, and he's looking at potentially serving 15 years in prison for racketeering?
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing about them setting themselves on fire.
Yeah.
Listen, people know that I'm friendly with Joey Merlino. People, can make whatever assertions they want. But I think at the end of the day, listen, I don't know Pete Tuccio at all. I did meet him once or twice at Joey Merlino's trial. He seemed like just kind of a goofy kid more than anything.
Yeah.
He looks a lot younger than he is. I really don't know what his background is. If I read the papers like everybody else here in New York, they talk about his uncle being a made guy. And to me, that's all nonsense. I mean, who you're related to shouldn't be indicative of what you're doing. Now, the fact that they were caught on camera doing this, it's just one of those things. I obviously haven't seen the footage myself, but if we're going to believe what the government's assertion is of that, then obviously they did some pretty dumb shit. But
Yeah.
as far as Joey goes, listen, I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of these guys make, and I'm not saying Joey made a mistake, because in my opinion, I think that there's a huge gap between what myth and what reality is, and they've gone out of their way for 20 years now to try to put Joey on every fucking murder case there's ever been, every fucking extortion case there's ever been. But the reality is who he knows, who he shakes hands with, who he says hi to, doesn't really translate to me as having some sort of a business partnership. Now, that being said, taking photos on Instagram and all of this shit, on one hand, I think it's a stupid thing. I can just tell you what I try to do with the people I know is I get out of the way. I don't get in a photo. I don't get in a video. And it's not because I'm protecting myself. I'm protecting them. And I don't need to be in a photo. It doesn't make me special. But then again, at the same time I say that to you, I can also say that if they're just friends, what the fuck is the problem?
Yeah.
You're allowed to take photos and stuff. I think the bigger issue and some of the things that I've heard, at least from my circle, is that this kid was putting a lot of stuff on Instagram. He was bragging about having an ankle monitor, and those are all dumb fucking things to do. But he's a kid. Obviously, if he's involved in that lifestyle at all, he's got an ego to himself. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but when you do things like that, you're giving the feds more information than they really need to have, and it puts you in a jam, because if you try to say you don't know somebody, they're going to say, well, there's 100 fucking photos of you and this guy eating dinner together. How do you not know him? And I think from that perspective, that's why you learn to duck. But I mean, like I said, I don't know the kid personally. I shook his hand, talked to him once or twice very briefly. Seemed like a very nice kid. But you know what? It is what it is. I just think in this day and age, you got to learn to duck. And that's it. Because honestly, hold on one second. Because the thing is that when you're friends and you have associations with people, and you get in trouble, that automatically has a domino effect on them. And that's my whole thing.
Absolutely. Definitely. Now, another question I wanted to ask. Now, New York's been relatively quiet for street violence and murders in recent years. Obviously, the five families are trying to, fly under the radar and not attract attention from the police. But there was a really shocking murder that took place, and that was the murder of Gambino crime family boss Frank Cali at his home last year. Now, my first reaction to that was that it wasn't mob-related. It later turned out that it wasn't. And Anthony Comello was arrested for shooting him outside his home. Now, there's a few different stories with this one. There's a few people seem to think that, Comello's some weirdo and conspiracy theorist, and he's gone down there to, for some paranoid reason, kill Frank Cali. But there's also some suggestion that he was keen on Frank Cali's niece, and Frank Cali warned him away, and that's a reason why he went down there to shoot him. I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that crime. What can we expect to happen to Anthony Comello in the prison system in the near future? And do you think that's going to cause any internal issues with the Gambino family, any power struggles?
Well, the thing I know is that after Frank Cali was killed, the Gambinos actually had an internal investigation, and they asked a lot of questions because they weren't even sure whether it was an outside mob hit or not. That's number one. Number two is Anthony Comello is not going to live past his fucking sentencing date. They're going to kill him. We can try to justify murder all day long, but the kid should be killed. If you're going to live by his street code, the kid should be killed. Do I think he's just, do I think this is some conspiracy theory? No, the kid was a fucking nut job. He's a wackadoodle. And he was interested in Frank Cali's niece. Frank Cali wanted him away, and Comello got scared, and so he pulls the trigger. Now, what a lot of people don't know is this is not the first time Anthony Comello has done this. He was actually borderline stalking and going after another maid guy's daughter who was in the DeCavalcante crime family in Jersey, who actually lived in Staten Island. And he had tried stalking her. And from what I understand, her father put a stop to it. So this is not like a one-off deal. This is something that this kid has done repeatedly with people. And at the end of the day, the thing that really surprised me about it is that Frank Cali left himself so wide open to be hit. I just don't think it's a weird thing for me. First of all, if you're going to kill a maid guy outside of his house, you got balls. I don't care what anybody says. The kid had balls. He took care of business. He did what he had to do. But I think what leads people down this weird conspiracy path is the fact that the FBI was saying that they could not track the car. They couldn't track anything that happened. Yet it comes out days later that they tracked this kid back to his fucking house in New Jersey. Yet they're saying that all the cameras in New York didn't pick up the truck, didn't pick up anybody leaving. So it's like that's why you have a conspiracy, is because the FBI either didn't release the information or the FBI was afraid that something would happen. But I think the kid's just a whack job. I don't think that there's going to be any resounding effects because, listen, let's be honest about the streets. When one guy goes, another guy steps up. It's just a revolving door. I don't think – and this is the other thing. A lot of people are saying that Frank Cali was the boss of the Gambino crime family. He wasn't. There's somebody else that was, in fact, the the boss of the Gambinos, and that Frank Cali got his position because John Gotti Sr. put him there. It had nothing to do with Frank Cali being, he obviously was a huge earner. He was a very respected guy, but the reality is he was not the active boss. He might have been a street boss, but he was not the active boss. And that's one of the things the press has gotten completely wrong.
Yeah. Now, there was another murder last year in New York as well, which made headlines. And that was the murder of Bonanno associate Sylvester Satola. Now, shockingly about this one, it was actually his own son, Anthony Zatola, who ordered the hit, and he used the Blood Street Gang to carry out the hit. And he'd also made an attempt to kill his own brother months previous to that. I mean, to me, that just seems crazy, wanting to kill your family members. What was that all about? And do you see that causing any trouble between the five families and the Blood Street Gang as well?
I think it was about money. I don't think that there's any reason why you would, have your father killed, try to have your brother killed. It obviously, I think, came down to money. And a lot of people on the streets have talked about there was a very lucrative Joker poker machine operation going on, and he wanted control of that. And meanwhile, you got to remember that Sylvester Zatola paid for his kids. Whatever they wanted, they got. I mean, he took care of his kids. He took care of his family. They didn't really want for a whole lot of anything. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just a more simplified version of greed more than anything. But I don't think there's going to be any retribution for the Bloods. I mean, if we look at historically, the Lucchese crime family has used the Bloods in a million different ways to commit murders. Yeah. And I think that if we look at it from an Italian perspective, I think the one thing that bothers a lot of street guys is the fact that you would even use, not that they're, I'm trying to not sound like a racist asshole, but the idea that they would use African Americans to do this upset a lot of people. But I don't think you're going to have any retribution for it, because everybody that was involved in that is all hemmed up and in jail now, and they're going to do a life sentence. So I don't think you're going to see any retribution. I think it's just the whole incident, I think, is just more vile than it was anything. Yeah,
definitely. Well, moving on to my next question. Now, other than, the murders of Zatola and Frank Cali, New York's been relatively quiet for street violence and murders in recent years. But one place which is in sharp contrast to New York at the moment is Montreal in Canada. Now, there's a mob war going on over there between different factions, and there seems to be a made man or an associate being killed nearly every month over there. I just wanted to know your opinion on that. And can you tell us, who are the factions fighting? What are they fighting over? And do you see any end to the violence over there in the near future?
I think you're going to see an end. From what I understand, there was a high-level meeting between the Rizzuto crime family, what was left of them, and the Hells Angels. And they've kind of come to an accord and an agreement. And that's a huge step. And the reason why that's a huge step is because if you have the Hells Angels, which are a major group in Canada, if you have them backing your side of things, other fringe groups are going to stop. I think a lot of this has to do with old school vendettas, and the big trade over there obviously is drugs and tobacco, and they've been fighting over this kind of stuff for years and years and years. And it's basically, you have Sicilian Cosa Nostra, and then you have the little tiny subgroups, and then you have Ndrangheta. And Ndrangheta is totally another type of operation. And Ndrangheta has been warring with the Rizzutos for 20 years. I mean, if you look at just the last 6 years, there have been 30 murders.
That's crazy.
I didn't think it was going to slow down at all. But I think at the end of the day, if the reports that at least I'm being told from somebody I know in Canada, that the Hells Angels sat down with the Rizzutos and have backed them, that is going to calm this shit down a lot, because the motorcycle gangs that are specifically there really control the ebb and flow of drugs more than anybody in that country. And when you are able to pull them to the side and get them on your side, other groups are going to be less apt to try to go after you. Mm-hmm. But I think that ultimately the difference is, because what people don't seem to understand is, they say, well, New York's got the five families, but yet they're not killing anybody. But here we are in Toronto and Montreal, and everybody's killing everybody. You've got to understand, these are a different breed of guys. These guys are closer to what goes on in Italy than they are to what's going on in the United States. And a lot of people have said that the mob here in New York has gone soft. I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think that they're in a position now where it's money over everything. And if your focus is on money and not retribution, then I think that's why you see things that are relatively quiet. Not only that, but you can't go a block in New York City without being seen on camera. So the idea of the gangland shootings in the middle of the street like they hit on Paul Castellano, you're never going to see that again.
Yeah.
So I think that's so. If there is any truth that the Hells Angels have sort of, signed an agreement with the Rizzuto crime family, you're going to see the murders probably stop.
Now, another question I wanted to ask. Now, we've spoken about Sammy the Bull quite a few times. You kind of like know my opinion on it. I've spoken about him on briefly on my podcast. He was released from prison early back in September 2017, and recently he did an interview on the Value Entertainment YouTube channel. Did you watch that? What's your opinion on the interview, and what's your opinion on Sammy the Bull in general?
I mean, I think Sammy the Bull is a good storyteller. I think that if I had to be honest, I mean, we have to be honest about one thing here, and this is the thing that sort of gets lost in the translation of everything. John Gotti Sr. had a big fucking mouth. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's in this industry or in this genre that's going to tell you John Gotti never said a word. Now, if John Gotti doesn't say what he says, Sammy the Bull probably doesn't react the way he does, and there's like a domino effect. Now, just because Gotti got caught on wiretaps and said a lot of stupid shit doesn't give Sammy the Bull the right to do what he did. But at the end of the day, I can kind of understand where he comes from. I'm not justifying anything. I mean, he's still a fucking rat. He's still a scumbag. But I think the bigger question is, was he honest in that interview? And I think he was honest, but I think from a perspective of I can't mention the guy's name, but you're going to know who I'm talking about. There are these guys that try to inflate themselves, try to make themselves bigger, try to make themselves sound more prolific. Sammy doesn't need to do that. I think everybody can agree that Sammy was a gangster. He was a tough guy in the streets. I don't think anybody's questioning that, but I also think that he's taken liberties with some of the actual truth of what's happened to him. And I think the other thing too is this thing on Frank Locascio, and he is now trying to help Frankie get out of prison. And my question is, okay, well, if Frankie didn't do nothing wrong and he's not guilty of the stuff that they convicted him of, then why the fuck didn't you speak up 30 years ago? Yeah. And his excuse has always been, well, nobody asked me. So now all of a sudden you want to try to do the right thing. And it's like, what do you mean nobody asked you? You're supposed to do the right thing. And I think in relative terms, I don't think Sammy Gravano has ever been about doing the right thing. Yeah. Is he a rat? Yeah. Is he a scumbag? Yeah. But what you can't take away from the guy is his history. Yeah. Even if he inflates it, deflates it. But I thought it was an entertaining video, to say the least. I also think it's highly entertaining that the usual suspects who always come out and trash anything that anybody says anti-Gotti don't have a fucking word to say at this point. And I think that that's a little bit interesting. I think that the fact that nobody's attacking him says a lot. It either says that the guy's telling more hardcore truth than people think, or they're intimidated by him. I'm not really sure. I don't, me, I don't get involved in that kind of nonsense. But he's got a story. It's entertaining, but you got to be careful how much you believe.
Now, you had a short break from Mob Talk Radio over the Christmas period, and you was away for a couple of weeks, but you're back now. I just wanted to know, when can we expect your next show out, and what can we expect from Mob Talk Radio this year?
Well, I think the first thing is, and I haven't been public about any of this kind of stuff. I try to keep my private life private. I try not to what's going on, because we've talked. I do, yeah. But I think that, and I'll be honest, I went through a breakup with a girl I was seeing, and that's shitty enough as it is. But there were some things that happened after that are just fucking repulsive. First of all, the Flanagans is done. You will never see the light of day on the Flanagans. I am no longer involved in that project. I can't get into details specifically surrounding that, only because it's pointless to talk about it. But there is a part of that I have to bring up, is that anytime you've known somebody for years, You're going to have arguments. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have problems.
Yeah.
But the minute that somebody starts telling people that you're in the Philly Mafia, you're associated with this guy, with that guy, you have dinner with this guy in New Jersey, you took part in this, you took part in that, and this fucking person called my lawyer and is making all kinds of fucking claims and assertions that are just the most ridiculous shit that you've ever heard in your life. That's exactly why no matter what the parameters would be with the TV show, and because there was a lot of things that happened. It just wasn't one thing. There was some stuff on my end that I could have done better, and I acknowledge that. But the minute that you start hiring private investigators to look at me, to look at people that you think I know in Philadelphia, I mean, it gets ridiculous. It's a fucking rat move. It's a scumbag move, and I have no respect for people like that. The minute that you do that, you are no longer going to be living in the safety and comfortability of your own home. And I don't mean that as a threat. I just mean that the minute you open your mouth and say stupid shit, make assertions and make up lies, and you try to put people's names into shit that have nothing to do with it, then you're asking for whatever happens. I can only control myself. I can't control anybody else. But that's a big part of the reason why I took a break, because it wasn't just that. They circle the wagons with all of these fucking people that just want to react, and they don't want to think about a situation. They don't want to think about the reality of issues, and they just want to react, and they want to make threats, and they want to say stupid shit. And so I just said, fuck it. I took a month off, and that's what it is. And anybody who, I may have been involved with contractually or professionally, it is what it is. I wish everybody the best of luck, but I cannot be around people who are going to make up lies and assertions about people that, A, they don't even know, and B, they're going to put me with this one. And I'm going to tell you one of the more hilarious ones. The hilarious one was that Joey Merlino was paying for my attorney. Now, first of all, what's hilarious to me about that is, one, my attorney, I met, it doesn't matter where I met the guy, how I know him, but he's doing me a solid. He's doing me a favor because he's a friend. Okay, nobody's paying my lawyer bills, but this is the kind of disgusting shit these people say. It's, I had a dinner at Margate with a fucking captain, or I hang out with this one and that one in Philly. And it just, to me, it's like, if you're going to say, and this is going to bring me to a point, and then I'll shut up. If you're going to sit there and like brag about all of these mob guys you fucking know, all right, which is what this guy has done, and you're going to get reckless with your mouth, then you realize, because you've been reckless, that there could be problems as a result of this, and you get scared, and then you want to start making up more shit. It's just, I don't understand it, and it's okay. I'm moving on from it, but it is what it is, and that's the reason why I went away. And I'm not going to get into any more details about that. I'll let my attorney handle all of that. But as far as where mob talk is going to go, I wish I could tell you. I'm not really sure. I think one thing I'm definitely going to do is we're going to move Mob Talk over to a podcasting service. It will probably be free for a couple of months, and then it's going to go pay. At this point, it's time to head that direction, and it'll be an application that you can download. You'll be able to get them on iTunes, Google Play, and all of this kind of stuff. And it just gives me a platform to just upload the shows and let people pick and choose and decide what they want to do. And I think that's the right direction to head. As far as like writing articles and stuff like that, I'm not sure how much longer I want to keep doing that, but I am working on a book as well. And there's also, I have another production that is going to begin. So for anybody that thinks that, if the Flanagans doesn't work or didn't work, that I was one off and I was done at that, they're out of their fucking minds. Soon I will be announcing an entertainment deal that I did sign. And so I'm going to be very busy for the next year with a lot of different stuff. But anybody that thinks that I was one and done with a bad experience with the Flanagans or anything, they're out of their minds. So it is what it is. Listen, at the end of the day, I really got to say, I don't wish nobody no ill will. I just want to be left alone and go on with my life. But these people, I don't know what it is with their brains. They just can't let shit go. It's borderline stalking behavior. You know how it is.
I do.
You've seen it. You've seen it yourself.
I've seen it myself, and you're better off out of that, Jeff. And I'm excited to hear about you. What you're going to be doing in the future with this new deal and everything. That sounds fantastic. There's just one more question I wanted to ask you. A bit more of a light-hearted question. I just wanted to know, I believe you watched The Irishman. I just wanted to know what your opinion of the film was. Personally, I thought it was okay. It wasn't anything spectacular. I felt like there was a few people in roles in that film that shouldn't have been playing those roles. But it weren't a bad film. What's your opinion on it? And furthermore, what's your opinion on Frank Sheeran? Do you think that he really did kill Joey Gallo? And do you think that he was involved in killing Jimmy Hoffa as well?
I think Frank Sheeran is a lot of things. I have talked extensively with some people in Philadelphia that actually knew him. Mm-hmm. And nobody has ever said that the guy was full of shit. I think that do I think he killed Jimmy Hoffa? Listen, I don't know. I wasn't there, and I think that's going to be the $1 million question. You're going to have your pundits that are going to say he didn't do it, but I think the guy had way too much information about a subject he shouldn't have had, and so if he was not directly involved, he was indirectly involved. As far as killing Joey Gallo, that's the one I actually believe. A lot of people don't. I happen to believe it. But the movie was too long. I think De Niro was god-awful. I thought that Joe Pesci was the best one. I think that even...
I totally agree with you on that one.
Even Harvey Keitel played Angelo Bruno was fantastic. I think there are a lot of things that were great, but I think that the film was so inaccurate in so many ways. And I say this because you have to understand the connection between Jimmy Hoffa, Russell Buffalino, and why Jimmy Hoffa hated John F. Kennedy so fucking much and Bobby Kennedy so much. That also brings in Sam Giancana into the mix, and that goes back to the Kennedy election and some other things. But the film didn't take the time to explain why Hoffa hated them so fucking much. Yeah. And I think if they had done that, I think that gives a better perspective from a historical reference to understand the ins and outs, because not a lot of people talk about how Kennedy got elected, why he got elected, the promises that were made to the mob, how that dealt with Castro and Cuba and Lansky and Luciano, and just there's a whole bunch of things that they didn't add. I just thought the film was just long. I just think that it was kind of schizophrenic and all over the place, and I didn't like it. I really was not a fan of the film just because I think, and two, I knew going into it that it was going to be a more political film than it was going to be a gangster film. Yeah. And I think for the major people that go to want to see a gangster film, they were expecting to see something a little different. And I think that had they known ahead of time or read the book ahead of time, they kind of would have known what they were getting involved in. But for me, it was probably not one of the better mob films I've ever seen. But then again, it was better than some other ones too. I just think that... it's a swan song for Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro and those guys and Al Pacino. Al Pacino I thought was great, but I just think that what Scorsese is typically doing is he seems to be recycling a lot of things. And I just think that the mob genre is dead anyway. I don't think that mafia films, at least from the perspective of like Donnie Brasco and the Gotti film, which was atrocious, I just don't think mob films are going to, it always seems to be the same stereotypes, the velour suits, the shiny stuff of murder and women, and I think they need to have more stories that deal with the politics of it. And I think if you deal with the politics of the mob, that's something nobody's ever seen. But for my money, listen, they can win all the awards in the world, but to sit there for 3.5 fucking hours was ridiculous. Yeah. Ridiculous.
I'd have to agree with you on that one. Listen, Jeff, thank you very much for coming on today. It's been great talking to you, as it always is. I wish you all the best with Mob Talk Radio and your writing and your future ventures. Before you go, do you want to just plug your websites and tell people where they can find your blog and your Facebook, YouTube?
On Facebook, type in Mob Talk Radio. That'll take you there. You go on Twitter. I think it's at Real Mob Talk 7. On YouTube, type in Mob Talk Radio. There's a couple hundred. I think there's 106 shows or whatever. But that's pretty much it. And we do a lot of Q&As and stuff like that. But, like I said, thanks for having me on, and I do appreciate it.
Not a problem. And for any of the people listening, for my listeners, we will put all Jeff's information in the YouTube video as well for you to go and check out his sites. Once again, Jeff, thank you very much for coming on. It's always great talking to you. Much love to you. Take care of yourself, pal.
All right, thanks.
Cheers. Catch you later, Jeff. Bye. Right, that's the end of our podcast show for today. I hope you enjoyed it, everyone. As usual, please do us a favour and like, share and subscribe to the channel. Just to give you a feel of what's going to be coming in the near future, I am still going to have Chris Clark on to do the Stephen Downing story. If you don't know who Stephen Downing is, he suffered the worst case of miscarriage of justice in the UK. When he was 17 years old, he was wrongfully convicted and sent down for the murder of Wendy Sewell in Bakewell. And he served over 27 years of his life in prison. Thankfully, he was eventually released. That murder is still unsolved. Chris Clark actually ghostwrote Stephen's book for him, so we're going to have Chris on and discuss that. I'm hoping as well in the near future, because I do have Stephen Downing on my Facebook friends list, and I do occasionally speak to him. I'm hoping that we can get the man on himself in the near future and hear his story. That would be fantastic. So I'm working on that one. We'll see if we can get that one sorted out soon. I'm also going to do a long feature length episode of the East Lancs Ripper case. I'm going to do a show on that. I'm going to do one on Trevor Hardy, the Beast of Manchester. I'm looking at doing one on the Boarded Barns murders, the unsolved case of Lisa Hessian, and at some point I want to do a big show on Charles Bronson, Britain's most violent prisoner. So got a lot to go at there. Stay tuned for those. Thanks again for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, look after yourselves, everyone. Have a great week ahead, and I'll see you soon.